back home, and we're happy to have him here with us today. So welcome, Jon.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm thrilled for this opportunity. So thanks for having me. Like Chris said, my name is Jon Terry. I'm the acting executive director of the Sable Institute. We're located in northern Kalkaska County, about 35 miles straight east of Traverse City. We're on about 100 acres. We're on a little lake called Big Twin Lake. We've got bogs and ponds and rivers and fields and forests. We're just a big outdoor classroom, and it's a beautiful place. And when this pandemic is over, I invite you to come on out and visit us. We love visitors on our trails. I'm going to share, I've got some slides, so I'm going to share my screen. I'm assuming that's working, Chris. Stop me if it's not. But my presentation today is on the business case for butterflies, which is really about the connection between Michigan's economy and the natural environment.
Jon, it's working, just so you know. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. At our another just quick moment about Sable before I kind of get more into the presentation is our mission is to inspire and educate people to serve, protect, and restore God's earth. And we believe it's wrong to wreck or waste the earth because we feel the earth's a gift and we didn't make it, and we're called to serve and protect it. So we're open to all and we serve all, but it's our faith that deeply motivates us to do our work. So that's why we do what we do. Now let me tell you quickly what we do. Our work is really in 4 categories. The first is a college program that's in the summer. Essentially, we're a science or biology field station for about 50 different Christian colleges throughout the US and Canada. Big schools like University of Michigan or Michigan State will have their own field stations, but if you're a small Christian college like Calvin or Cornerstone or Spring Arbor, we serve as that for about 50 different schools throughout the US and Canada, and that takes place in the summer. Students come to us here in northern Michigan. We also have a campus off Seattle on Whidbey Island where you go and study marine. And we also have a campus in Costa Rica where every summer we host college students and they take courses with us for college credit. So that's the college program. We also have what we call our K-12 field school. Each year, in a normal year, about 2,000 local K-12 students from throughout northern Michigan will come to our campus and participate in outdoor and hands-on field school. We also have a program called RAISE, Restoration Ecology for Young Students. You'll learn a little bit about more later, where we go into 5 different elementary schools in the area and do the program there. We do research. Here's a team from this past summer. All of our courses this past summer were canceled, except we were able to host 4 research students, undergrad students who are doing some research on the Boardman River. This is a project spearheaded by the CRA there in Traverse City, but our students were involved in sampling some of the microinvertebrates in the river. And finally, we do community outreach. We adopt lots of local streams and trails. We do citizen science efforts. This photo is from a river sampling and monitoring of the Manistee River we did earlier this year. And we also just found out we were awarded a grant through the National Wildlife Federation called Sacred Grounds. And in 2021, we'll be putting in native plant gardens at houses of worship in Kalkaska and Grand Traverse County. I don't have time to really go into that project today other than to say we're really excited about it. And if you're involved in a house of worship, I'd love to hear from you if you're interested in putting in a little native plant garden at your site. So your work as an economic club focuses on the economy. At Sable, our work really focuses on ecology, which is the interactions and health of the plants, animals, insects, water, and forests of the area. One cool thing that might be obvious is that both those words start with eco. And eco comes from the Greek word oikos, which means house. And I think a house is a great metaphor for both your work related to the economy and our work related to ecology. Our house is this place that we love, and we all have a role in caring for it and making sure it's healthy and safe place to live. One of our most popular K-12 programs when students were in school and they would be able to come and visit us is a program called Michigan History. And local third graders would visit us and travel back in time to learn about the history of Northern Michigan. And what the students learn is that the history of the economy of Northern Michigan is really the history of our dependence on the natural environment. And that for hundreds of years, the health of the economy in Northern Michigan has been connected to the health of the natural environment. As part of the program, students visit a fur trapping village of the 1700s, and then they visit a logging camp of the 1800s. If we traveled back in time to 1750, the Traverse City Economic Club would have consisted primarily of fur trappers. And in 1850, the club would have consisted mostly of lumbermen. Now, assuming that you are not fur trappers and lumberjacks and lumberjills, I think it's wise to ask what happened. And what happened is that fur trappers trapped and trapped until there was nothing more to trap. And the lumbermen cut down white pine until there were no white pine left. And so the fur trapping economy was destroyed and the white pine lumber economy was destroyed. And if you look at these examples and other examples over the last few hundred years and even recent years, I think you'll see some patterns and themes. I think there's lessons we can learn from these themes related to human behavior and economics and the natural environment. So today, I'd like to share 3 of these themes that I think are relevant to us today. The first theme is that we degrade what we don't own. And the photo on the slide is from the Record Eagle a few years ago, just pointing out the fact that many public beaches in Traverse City get trashed during the Cherry Festival. So why do these beaches end up covered in litter? And the answer, I think, is because they're viewed as public beaches, and people are unwilling to maintain public areas in the same way that they would their own private property. This principle, which is both an ecological and economic principle, is sometimes referred to as the tragedy of the commons, and essentially just points out the truth that people usually take better of things they own. When you consider the lumbermen of the 1850s as they were cutting down the white pine, the common areas were the rivers that flowed between the trees. The rivers were considered public, and the fish in the river were considered public, and there was a lack of concern for the health of the river or the health of the fish in the river. So when the white pines were cut down, there was nothing to hold the soil in place. The sand filled the rivers. It destroyed the breeding grounds of a native fish called the Arctic grayling. Now, at the time, people loved the Arctic grayling. It's a very beautiful fish. I don't know if you can see me now, but at the end, actually behind me and hanging up above the door of my office is a drawing of an Arctic grayling. But it was a beautiful fish. It's fun to catch, and people flock from around the country to come to Northern Michigan to catch it. There was actually a town in Northern Michigan that was named Crawford. And in order to promote themselves and attract tourists, they renamed that town in honor of the fish, which is how the town of Grayling got its name. But no one felt a sense of ownership over the public rivers or of the fish. So now the Arctic grayling is no longer found in Michigan. So the tragedy of the commons could also be called the tragedy of Grayling, because the name of that town is a reminder that we tend to degrade and exploit things that are not owned. Lesson or theme number 2 is that the ecosystem provides economic value. When we think of the natural environment providing economic value to Northern Michigan, there's actually a couple types of value that I think of relevant. The first type is perhaps the one you thought of, and that's the value that comes to our economy from tourists and other people who come here to enjoy our beautiful area. As Chris mentioned, I grew up here. I was actually born in Traverse City. I was raised in Charlevoix. But I lived on the East Coast for about 20 years and moved back 5 years ago, primarily because of the beauty of the area. And yes, the people here are beautiful and friendly, but the real motivator for me was because I wanted to be near beautiful lakes and rivers and forests of northern Michigan. I read a newspaper article about a week ago talking about the impact on the economy of the natural environment. It says, according to the Michigan Economic Development Council, $408 million was spent in Northwest Michigan in 2018 on recreation, another $409 million on food and beverages, and $571 million on lodging related to recreation and tourism. Grand Traverse County led the 10-county region with an estimated $465 million in visitor spending. It was followed by Emmett County, where I live, at $400 million. In Michigan, 1 in 6 jobs are tied to tourism. So it's obviously that this kind of intangible benefit and the benefit of things like beauty are a huge economic driver and are extremely important to our region. And it's all coming from people coming to bike and hike and fish and hunt and swim and paddle and all the other things that rely on the natural environment. And I think it would be foolish to not recognize that that economy, the tourism and recreation economy, is fragile and can disappear, just like the fur trapping economy and the white pine lumber economy. So that's one type of economic value provided by the natural environment. The second type of value is called ecosystem services. And these are direct services that the natural environment provides for our economy. These are things like wetlands that naturally clean water, forests that help clean the air, and butterflies and pollinators that pollinate all of the agriculture products in the area. I want to quickly now share a 2-minute video that explains this value a little better, I think, than I can. Here we go.
Plants in the back, shovels are attached. Plants are green and the shovels are black.
Restoration ecology for young students.
The RAISE program is for restoration ecology for young students.
Restoration ecology for young students.
Ecology for young kids.
RAISE restoration ecology for young students.
And what are you doing today?
We're planting plants at the Boardman River, and as you can see, the river's right here.
What are we doing today? What are you doing right now?
We're planting at the Boardman River.
What are we putting in?
Plants, 1,000 plants.
Why are we planting them along the Boardman?
Because it's native plants in there. It's good for the earth.
What's the biggest thing you learned through RAISE?
How native plants, or how non-native plants can affect the native plants.
Because the invasive plants can harm like our soil and harm just how our natural earth is.
Natural like services and stuff that we get, like medicine, natural beauty and stuff like that.
Cool, so those ecosystem services. What watershed are you part of? Do you remember?
We're part of the Mill Creek watershed and Elk Lake watershed, Great Lakes watershed, and really part of like we're part of like Michigan and stuff like that.
What was your favorite part of RAISE?
The planting, what we're doing right now.
What we're doing right now? Cool. And so tell me about what we did today.
So what we did, we planted 1,000 native plants around our pond, and we planted them, we're mulching them, and we're weeding.
And what did you think of the program?
I think the program was amazing because it helped me learn a lot of environmental skills and things that help the environment and stay outdoors much longer and help people and living things.
Outdoors is like worth it. Like if you do good things to it, it'll help save like the earth.
Anything else you want to say?
I just want to say that nature is important.
Yeah. A chipmunk was eating my pet.
Water it, water it. Now we're done. Now we're done.
No, we forgot the dive.
Now we're done. Now
You got anything else to say? All right, thanks, man, for all your work.
So those students, I hope the sound came through on that. That's the RAISE program, and we're proud of the work that they've done in the community, not only learning about these ecosystem services, but actually playing an active role in supporting ecosystem services of the area and supporting the businesses that rely on these services. Quick note, I live in Petoskey, downtown Petoskey, and a neighbor to my right, if you look at the front of my house, the neighbor to my right owns a bike shop called Latitude 45, sells a lot of mountain bikes. I just bought a fat bike with them, getting ready for the winter. My neighbor to the left owns American Spoon Foods, which is a company that makes products derived from the fruit agriculture industry. So the businesses of my neighbor on the right depends on that first economic value, the value of outdoors and beauty and recreation and tourism. And the business of the neighbor on my left relies on these direct ecosystem services. So my two neighbors on each side of my house would not have jobs or businesses without the value of our local ecology. Related to American Spoon Foods and the fruit agriculture industry, particularly the tree fruit agriculture industry, I think we need to point out is an extremely fragile industry. It relies on numerous systems and patterns and services provided by the natural environment of northern Michigan. And the truth is that these patterns and systems are being disrupted primarily by human activity. And these disruptions are having a real and tangible impact on businesses in the area. For my neighbor at American Spoon Foods, the cherry crop was destroyed in 2012 because of an extreme weather event. And it negatively impacted their business. They had to completely change their plan for the year because of it. And what we're seeing and what they're seeing is that these rare and extreme events that used to be referred to as 100-year events are happening every 10 or 15 years. And crops will be wiped out and businesses are getting wiped out. And I'll also say it's never fair to point at something related to weather and say that is caused by climate change. But I think it is fair to say that an event is more likely due to climate change and that these rare events are now happening more frequently and have a direct and negative impact on many businesses in northern Michigan. And so there's a threat from a changing climate, and there's also huge threats due to habitat loss, overuse, and exploitation of resources that all disrupt these fragile and complex systems. Traverse City, as you know, is known for the Cherry Festival. And my fear is that we will look as silly as Grayling if we are the cherry capital of the world and we're no longer able to grow cherries here. The third lesson or theme is that there's always costs. When you manipulate or use the natural environment, there's always costs, and we're not smart enough to fully understand the costs. When I see a dead bird on the shores of Lake Michigan, such as the one on your screen there, I think of the Erie Canal. Why? Because of a book I read. I've got it here with me. It's called The Death and Life of the Great Lakes. It's by Dan Egan. It was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize, maybe came out about 5 years ago. And it provides example after example of economic decisions that have resulted in ecological disaster for the Great Lakes. The Erie Canal was purely an economic decision, and its impact has been a disaster for the ecology of Lake Michigan, a lake we all love because the canal opened up the Great Lakes to seafaring vessels, which brought with them seafaring animals like sea lamprey and quagga and zebra mussels. In the book, I'll just quickly read, he's talking about kind of the connection between the Erie Canal and that photo of the dead bird. He's just pointing out that these quagga mussels, the mussels increase water quality. This leads to a bloom in the sunlight-loving algae that dies and burns up massive amounts of oxygen. That opens up the door to botulism-causing bacteria. Then the invasive mussels suck up those bacteria and are in turn eaten by these gobies, which are it's a fish, it's an invasive fish. The poison gobies become paralyzed and are easy prey for birds like loons, grebes, and gulls, and then the birds die. This is not a rare occurrence. Biologists estimate more than 100,000 dead birds, including bald eagles, great blue herons, ducks, loons, terns, and plovers, have piled up on Great Lakes beaches since the botulism outbreaks turned rampant in 1999. The chair of the board of the Au Sable Institute is a man named Dave Lamb. He worked for years at a camp just south of Traverse City called Lake Ann Camp. And he walks the beach in the summer to count these dead birds. He's part of the Sleeping Bear Dunes avian botulism team. And the existence of an avian botulism team at Sleeping Bear Dunes is a cost of the Erie Canal, and we bear that cost. So when you manipulate or use the natural environment, there's always cost. The costs are often enormous, and they're often paid by people who weren't involved in making and did not benefit from the initial economic decision. One quick final note about costs. When it's clear that harm is being done, our response always is a mixture of three things: mitigation, which is stopping the harm from happening; adaptation, which is learning to live with the harm; and suffering. And we have to decide what is the mix of these that we're willing to accept. And this can apply to global health pandemics, as an example. This can apply to climate change, and this can apply to water pollution in northern Michigan. Now, on a whole, as a practice, I don't think it's helpful to label people as good or bad. But if there were villains in this story, they would be the people who knew that a harm was being done, purposely chose to avoid mitigation because they knew that they wouldn't be the ones suffering. So all of us, if we're being honest, has some villain in us, I think. It's important to admit that what we do, the decisions we make, and how we live will impact the environment and lead to suffering. And that suffering will likely be borne by the most vulnerable in our society, such as the poor and people of color. So the role of the business community, knowing these kind of three themes. What is the role of the Economic Club of Traverse City? And the reality is, the truth is that your club, the business community, is the driving factor of change in our country and in this area. If the Economic Club of Traverse City wants something to happen, it will get done. There's a great many nonprofits in the area that are working on these issues, but the reality is our impact is tiny and limited compared to the power of the business community. One quick example of this is Line 5, which, regardless of how you feel about Line 5, the reality is, for years, nonprofit groups, environmental groups, tribal groups, and others have been clamoring to get that pipeline off the bottom of the straits. But it's when a group of businesses formed an informal alliance called the Michigan Business Group that feelings about that line changed, and it really moved the needle. And it took businesses coming to the table and showing their power to make that change. As far as what you can do, if you're unsure what to do, I'm not a real fan of leaving people with lists of here's the 10 things you can do to care for the environment. But if you're unsure what to do, I encourage you to think of the 7th generation principle. My institute is located on the ancestral lands of the Odawa people, and I'm ashamed at how little I know of their history and culture. But a tribe member once shared with me the 7th generation principle, which is that you should make decisions now thinking about how it will impact 7 generations from now. I think that's a wise way to go about making decisions today. My final slide is this one, and it's just really to thank some organizations and businesses in the community. This has been a hard year for the Sable Institute. Our big economic driver at the Institute is our college program. We weren't able to hold in-person classes this summer, and that was a very difficult, and we're going through a very difficult year in response to COVID. These are some organizations that have stepped up and helped us. Earlier in this presentation, I talked about how I didn't like the term public because it conveyed a sense of non-ownership. The term I like better is community, which conveys a sense of joint ownership, kind of like the metaphor of the house I was referencing at the beginning. So these organizations have made us feel like a true community, that we're all working together on our house. Rotary Charities, they had this awesome, it was like a crisis support services where they would subsidize businesses to provide nonprofits like ours with services. So Megan Olds at Parallel Solutions provided great help to us related to strategic planning and how do we pivot in this environment. One Up Web provided us with services related to communications. And then on the right side of the screen, Cold Hard Cash is great as well. Paddle Antrim, they're a nonprofit themselves that are doing great work in the area. They have this program they established called Ripple Grants, Ripple Effect Grants, and they gave us a grant to help us build a hoop house or a greenhouse on our property that we use in those habitat restoration projects with the classrooms. The Community Foundation there in Traverse City is doing great work. And they've been a supporter of us as well. So I just wanted to end with that slide and a real, just a sense of appreciation of organizations that have really helped us through this time. And with that, that's my last slide. I want to thank you for the opportunity. Kalkaska County can feel like a world away from Traverse City, and I just appreciate the chance to be here and share some of the things I've been thinking about.
Jon, thank you. Excellent. I appreciate your hanging with us for the technical issues there at the beginning and whatnot. So
how'd the vote turn out? I'm kind of on pins and needles.
It's trickling in, so I'm gonna have to track people down. I've never hosted a vote on Zoom before, so we've got some comments to those members online still. I'd encourage you to submit questions to the Q&A or chat feature, and I will be happy to read those off.